We all become very familiar with the characters in our favorite TV shows, but we sometimes forget that the actors who play those roles have their own real-life struggles to contend with. In some cases, these issues can cause them to get into trouble with the law, and the resulting fallout is visible for the whole world to see. Number 10. The world was left shocked when, in 2004, Martha Stewart, a woman who was mostly associated with homemaking, business acumen, and general wholesomeness, was arrested and put on trial for conspiracy to obstruct justice and making false statements to federal investigators. Stewart's troubles started while her career was flourishing, and she'd become a household name in many countries around the world. She was dubbed the first female self-made billionaire, having authored several best-selling books and hosting an Emmy-winning television show. She was also an entrepreneur who owned stakes in a biopharmaceutical company called McCoy Systems, and she owned a media company called Omni Media. Her life seemed to be perfect, but in 2001, things took an unexpected turn. On the 27th of December of that year, she suddenly decided to sell her McCoy stakes, and she was immediately suspected of committing insider trading as the company's share price plummeted by over 8% the next day. She'd been working with a stockbroker named Peter Bakanovic, and the pair was questioned in 2003. Bakanovic stated that the allegations were untrue and that they had no insider information before the sale was made, but investigators refused to believe them. And on the 4th of June, 2003, the SEC filed a lawsuit against them. Both the accused pleaded not guilty to the charges against them. At her trial, it was alleged that Bakanovic had tipped Stewart off about the imminent drop in the company's share price after she learned its CEO, Sam Waxel, and his daughter were planning on selling their shares. This was a sure indication that the company's share price was about to fall sharply, but that information was not available to the public, and hence it was assumed that Bakanovic not only received inside information, but that he then decided to share it with Stewart. If these allegations were found to be true, Bakanovic would be found guilty of insider trading and securities fraud. At Stewart's trial, it was revealed that she sold not just some, but all of her shares in the company in one fell swoop, and avoided losing as much as $45,000. Further charges allege that the pair then conspired to lie to the authorities when they were questioned about the sale, and that they had done so on more than one occasion. Stewart stated she had no memory of such a conversation between her and Bakanovic, but further evidence to the contrary was then presented. It was discovered that as soon as they were implicated, Stewart edited an incriminating message about selling her shares to make it seem as though there'd never been such a discussion. The resulting trial lasted for 6 weeks, during which Stewart's fans waited with bated breath to hear what her fate would be, and in March of 2004, she was found guilty and ordered to serve 5 months in a prison in West Virginia. Number 9. Dustin Diamond is best remembered for playing the role of Screech Powers in the sitcom Saved by the Bell. But as an adult, he found himself in trouble with the law after he became involved in a bar fight in December of 2014. Diamond became interested in acting from an early age. His role as Screech on Saved by the Bell cemented his career, as he became a well-known face for more than 12 years. When the show was finally ended, he remained in the comedy world as he started doing stand-up shows. But he also appeared on game shows and reality TV shows, such as The Weakest Link and Celebrity Boxing. He landed a few small roles in movies, and in 2007, he was included in the cast of Celebrity Fit Club. But he quickly started feuds with some of his fellow contestants and the show's host. Following this, he made a few more small appearances in lesser-known films, and in 2009 he published a memoir called Behind the Bell, in which he recounted some of his more memorable experiences while working on the sitcom. It was not received well, since it included some distasteful statements about his co-stars, and he would later claim that many of these descriptions were made up by a ghostwriter who wrote the book with very little information to go on. In his spare time, he played bass in a band called Salty the Pocket Knife, but only managed to record one album before splitting up due to disagreements between the band members. But his life has also included some time in prison. In 2014, He and his fiancée, Amanda, were at a bar in Port Washington, Wisconsin, and as was to be expected, he was recognized. Some people in the bar wanted to pose for photos with him, and he obliged, but one particular group started making comments towards the couple, and he would later state that he was feeling threatened. In an effort to stop their behavior, he produced a small, sharpened blade, and a fight broke out, during which one man was wounded. At his hearing, he stated he only produced the blade to protect his fiancée, and that he never intended to hurt anyone. When all was said and done, he was sentenced to 4 months behind bars, but this would not be the last time he ended up in trouble with the law. In May of 2016, he was tested as part of his parole and was found to have a prohibited painkiller in his system. He'd violated his parole since he was supposed to remain sober, and was only permitted to use the painkiller in question with the doctor's prescription, which he didn't have. At first, he denied taking the medication, but then backtracked and stated that he may have taken some for a toothache. He added that the medication was left over from an old prescription and that he was unaware exactly what he was taking. He would later be criticized for not taking the incident with the blade seriously, as he showed no remorse for the injured man and appeared to make light of the crime he'd committed during an interview. But he did then admit that he had made a mistake that night, but still blamed the show that he'd appeared on for editing the interview to make him seem unremorseful. For the second charge, he received 2 days in jail. He passed away in 2021 at the age of 44. Number 8. Reality TV show enthusiasts will be familiar with the show Survivor, which pits 2 teams of contestants against each other to test their abilities, while stuck in a remote location. Each week, one contestant is voted off by the others until a winner emerges. And in the show's first edition, which was released in 2000, the victor was Richard Hatch. He won a prize of $1 million, and since he was the first winner, was given the title of sole survivor. He didn't do his reputation much good on the show, though, because he quibbled with other contestants and quickly became a villain in the eyes of viewers. He justified his behavior by stating that he was to win at all costs, and maintained that his strategy had paid off since he was crowned the winner. But his life after the show ended has been filled with controversy and tangles with the legal system. The first incident having taken place in 2001, just a year after he appeared on Survivor. Hatch was arrested at his house near Providence, Rhode Island, when he and his then-boyfriend, Glenn, got into a physical fight. Glenn tried to enter the house, but he was prevented from doing so by Hatch, and following the incident, Glenn contacted the police, stating that Hatch had assaulted him. Hatch handed himself over to the police, and he was charged with misdemeanor assault and was found guilty. He was sentenced to 1 year of probation in order to cease all contact with Glenn, which was a non-issue since the pair had already split up after Hatch accused his former partner of taking advantage of him. But this was not the end of his legal troubles. In 2005, he was arrested again. This time, he was accused of tax evasion, filing a false tax return, mail fraud, bank fraud, and wire fraud. He'd failed to declare his income of $1.4 million, and thus received a 51-month prison sentence. When he failed to amend those same tax returns by 2009, he served a further 9 months in jail and was prohibited from traveling out of the country for 26 months. He since appeared on the 2024 edition of the reality TV show House of Villains, which ended with Hatch in 10th place. Number 7. The reality TV show Chrisley Knows Best centered on the wealthy Chrisley family, which includes Todd, a wealthy real estate tycoon, and his wife, Julie. The show ended in 2023, but it saw several spin-offs, including Growing Up Chrisley and Chrisley Confessions. Julie has also appeared on her own show called What's Cooking with Julie Chrisley, but all of these shows were canceled after both Todd and Julie, who were 53 and 49 respectively at the time, were sent to prison in 2023. It had come to light that the couple's lavish lifestyle had started to catch up with them financially, and in order to maintain their status, they were desperate to secure $30 million in bank loans. They were in debt to the tune of $20 million, but when they were unable to obtain their loan legally, they decided to take a different route. It would later be discovered that they had falsified certain documents and then applied for large loans at small community banks between 2007 and 2012. They then filed for bankruptcy in an effort to abscond from the $20 million that they'd already owed. All of this happened in 2014, 2 years before they became well-known reality TV stars, but their actions had not gone unnoticed. After they were arrested on bank fraud charges, it was discovered that they'd failed to declare much of their earnings from the original show, which totaled in the millions of dollars, and that Todd had failed to pay $500,000 in back taxes that he owed since 2009. They were charged with 12 counts of wire fraud, conspiracy to commit bank fraud, and conspiracy to defraud the United States, along with their accountant, Peter Tarantino. The couple claimed that they were innocent and that they had enough evidence to prove it, but they did agree to pay almost $148,000 in back taxes, but still needed to go to trial for the $2 million tax evasion charge. The trial started in June of 2022, and they were both found guilty. In November, they were sentenced, and Todd was ordered to spend 12 years in prison, while Julie was sentenced to 7. Tarantino was sentenced to 3 years for his involvement in the scheme, after he was found guilty of filing false corporate tax returns on his client's behalf. Number 6. Fans of the TV show The Real Housewives of New Jersey will be familiar with Teresa Giudice. But she also appeared on The Celebrity Apprentice, and she's authored several cookbooks that went on to become bestsellers. But as is so often the case when reality TV stars finish their stints on their chosen shows, she and her then-husband Joe soon found themselves under a mountain of debt that totaled in the millions of dollars. In October of 2009, the couple, realizing that they were in deep financial trouble, filed for bankruptcy and reported that they were in a $10 million financial hole. $104,000 of that debt was owed to credit card companies, and around $85,000 was owed to contractors who'd completed repairs at their house. But their troubles were far from over. 4 years later, in 2013, they were both taken into custody when it came to light that they'd been committing fraud. It was discovered they'd been defrauding the very people who were lending them money, but that they had illegally taken out mortgages and several more loans. They also failed to disclose all of the assets that they owned, and they were hit with a total of 39 different charges. These included mail fraud, wire fraud, making false statements on a loan application, and bankruptcy fraud, to name just a few. When news of their arrests broke, Teresa made a public statement in which she said that she hoped the case would be resolved soon so that she could continue her career, but this was not the case. When they appeared in court, they pleaded guilty to the charges against them, and Teresa was heard saying that she'd made some bad mistakes in the past and that she was willing to face the consequences of those decisions. She told the judge that she was saddened by the fact that her family was being affected by her crimes, and she was truly remorseful. These statements, along with her willingness to admit her wrongdoing, were taken into account before sentencing commenced on the 2nd of October that year. Joe was sentenced to 41 months in prison, while Teresa received a 15-month term. She reiterated that she was satisfied with her sentence and vowed to make it up to her daughters and the rest of her family once she was released. Number 5. Ryan Jenkins and Jasmine Fiore got married in March of 2009, just 2 days after they met in a casino in Las Vegas. Following this, Jenkins appeared on the reality TV show I Love Money 3, and he was determined to be crowned the winner. If he were successful, he'd win a prize of $250,000, and it would later be revealed that he called Jasmine several times while filming, telling her that he wanted to win for her, and that they would then have the life that he'd been promising her. But others who were working on the show revealed later on that he was extremely jealous and would often call her to find out what she was doing and who she was spending time with while he was filming in Mexico. At first, they found it entertaining, but after a while they started becoming concerned about his obsessive behavior. But no one could have expected what happened shortly after the show's filming had been completed. He immediately traveled back to Las Vegas to be with Jasmine, but then something went horribly wrong. In May of that year, his jealousy escalated, and he hit Jasmine in the arm, causing her to fall into a swimming pool. He was arrested and charged with domestic assault, but they reconciled and then traveled to San Diego for a charity poker event. But their arguing only continued as Jenkins repeatedly accused Jasmine of being unfaithful. and eventually she had their marriage annulled, according to some sources. On the 13th of August 2009, the pair arrived for their stay at the Del Mar Hilton in California, and the next day they were seen at the Ivy Hotel. Jenkins returned to their hotel room alone at 4:30 the next morning, and he checked out alone at around 9 a.m. The next day, someone informed the police that they'd found something gruesome in a dumpster in Buena Park, California. A man named Frank DiStefano stated that he was sifting through the dumpster looking for recyclable material when he came across the suitcase, and when he opened it, he was shocked to find a body inside. When investigators arrived, they found a suitcase containing human remains that would eventually be identified as Jasmine's. Jenkins was immediately named as the #1 suspect, and he fled. It would then come to light that he'd previously been arrested for domestic abuse against his former girlfriend, and it was assumed that he'd fled back to his home country of Canada. The police asked the public to keep an eye out for his car, or Jasmine's, which was now missing. But they were warned not to approach him, since he was believed to be carrying a firearm. They were concerned that he'd be hard to track down, since he'd had enough money to travel anywhere, and so he needed to be tracked down as soon as possible. The authorities speculated that he may have driven to Washington State before boarding a boat to the border. From there, it was speculated that he crossed into Canada on foot, and a search was started in that area. A tip was then received that a man who looked like Jenkins had arrived at Point Roberts in Washington, and it was now almost certain that he'd walked across the border into Canada. He was eventually tracked down to the Thunderbird Motel in Hope, British Columbia, where he was seen with his half-sister, but when he was found, he'd passed away. His mother maintains that he's innocent in Jasmine's case, but the authorities are certain that he was indeed the culprit, since he wouldn't have attempted to evade the law if he were innocent. Number 4. James McCoy Taylor is known as a country singer who was once a member of the Redmond Road Band, but he became a household name while attempting to win the affections of JoJo Fletcher on the 12th season of the reality TV show The Bachelorette. He ended up taking 6th place, and the eventual winner of the show was a former football player, Jordan Rogers. But he also had a few run-ins with the law, the first of which occurred in 2022. On that occasion, Taylor was arrested after he was found to be intoxicated while operating a vehicle, and to make matters worse, he was handed an extra charge for the unlawful carrying of a firearm. When he was taken into custody, the police found an 18-year-old woman in his truck and discovered that she was so intoxicated that she was unable to appreciate the danger that Taylor's drunk driving had posed to her life. After his hearing, Taylor served 5 days in jail, but he had to pay a fine, and his driver's license was suspended. But this was a mild case compared to what happened in 2024, when Taylor was arrested again. By this time, he was 38 years old, and he was spending time with a 19-year-old woman who he met at Menzies Money Bar in College Station, Texas. They then decided to go back to his condo, where they spent some time together, but the woman then decided to leave after he became, quote, too intense. She made a phone call to a friend from the condo's bathroom and asked them to call an Uber for her. Taylor accompanied her to the front door, but when she tried to walk outside, he suddenly lost his temper and tried to stop her from leaving. She told the police that he threw her to the ground and then tried to restrain her by placing his full body weight on top of her. Luckily, she was able to free herself somehow, and she fled to safety. When she contacted the police, they noted that she had several bruises on her body, and she showed them text messages between her and her friend in which she explained what had happened. When Taylor was confronted, he denied the allegations, stating that they were just having fun. He was arrested and charged with unlawful restraint, but he refused to take responsibility for his actions, stating that since he was a large individual, the woman could never have been able to escape had he wished to restrain her. He was unable to provide the police with the victim's name because they'd only spent a short time together. He added that since he didn't have any scratches or bruising, he couldn't have possibly been the one who fought with the woman. And following the incident, he made a few strange public statements. In one, he stated that he's nice to every single person he meets, but that people are continually trying to ruin his life. He further added that if the woman had really been hurt, the photos of her injuries would have been all over the internet. But he did plead guilty and was sentenced to serve 80 hours of community service, and he had to pay a $750 fine, attend anger management classes, and he was warned not to have any further contact with the victim, and he's now banned from the Northgate Entertainment District. Number 3. Ronnie Ortiz-Magro is one of the stars of the reality TV show Jersey Shore and was born in the Bronx in New York City. Before he achieved television fame, he worked for his father as a real estate agent, but in 2009, he was chosen to appear on the show. He's also known for appearing on the TNA wrestling show Impact Wrestling as a member of a tag team with Eric Young. Following these stints on TV, he appeared in a few advertisements and in the film The Three Stooges. In 2017, he was included in the cast of Famously Single, and the following year he appeared on Jersey Shore Family Vacation. But while the show was still running, he announced that he would no longer be a part of it since he was struggling with mental health issues. In 2021, his life took another downward turn when he was arrested for domestic violence. The incident occurred in Los Angeles on the 22nd of April, and it was reported that he had, quote, attacked a partner and caused them injury. But this was the second time that he'd been arrested for the same crime. In May of the previous year, he was ordered to serve 36 months under probation, and he had to complete 30 days of community service as part of a plea deal. He also had to donate $20,000 to a Los Angeles women's shelter after he was found guilty of assaulting his then-girlfriend, Jen Harley. When his second arrest occurred, he was still on probation for the first case, and since he had a prior history of similar conduct, he was released on $100,000 bail. Following his release, he took to social media platforms to thank all of his friends who stood by him, and added that he'd be taking his experience as a lesson learned. His girlfriend, Sapphire Matos, also made a statement stating that she and Ortiz-Magro were fine, and that people shouldn't believe everything they read in the media. She hinted that the allegations against him were false and that he was being targeted so that his victim could get attention. In June of 2021, Harley faced legal troubles of her own when she got into an altercation with an unnamed person in Las Vegas. Few details are available in this case, but it was alleged she had assaulted someone whom she co-owned a house in the area with a weapon, and she was charged with domestic battery and assault, and her bond was set at $5,000. Number 2. Love and Hip Hop Atlanta is a VH1 reality TV show that first aired in 2012, and it follows the lives of people who are involved in the hip-hop music scene in that area. It's a spin-off of the show Love and Hip Hop and has been on the air for 13 seasons. The show has seen some familiar faces, including radio DJs, glamour models, stylists, and socialites living in Atlanta. One of the most notable stars was Maurice Fayne, who's also known as Arkansas Mo, a truck company owner who at the time was engaged to Carly Red. He appeared on the show's 8th season, during which time he revealed to her that he had a child with another woman, and Red accused him of being controlling and abusive. He was included in 9 episodes of that season, but then he was arrested. In May of 2020, it was reported that he'd been taken into custody after he obtained a Paycheck Protection Program loan in the name of his company, Flame Trucking, during the COVID-19 pandemic. These loans were made available to business owners who'd been badly affected by the pandemic, and they were intended to provide them with some financial relief, as many businesses were forced to close their doors for an extended period. Unfortunately, many people took illegal advantage of these loans, one of whom was Fayne. The authorities reported that on the 15th of April, 2020, he applied for a loan at the United Community Bank in Georgia in the name of his company. He added that he was employing 107 people and that he had a monthly payroll of $1.49 million. He asked for a loan of $3.75 million so that he could pay his employees, keep his mortgage up to date, pay his lease, and make his utility payments. All of these factors were within loan parameters, but he didn't receive the full amount. He received $2.04 million, but within just a few days, it became apparent he had other ideas for the money. He spent $85,000 on expensive jewelry, including a diamond ring, a Rolex watch, and a diamond bracelet. He also paid $40,000 in outstanding child support, but these are not expenditures allowed by the Paycheck Protection Program. When his spending spree was noticed by federal agents, Fayne was tracked down and interviewed, but he claimed that the money was used to pay his employees and to pay certain business expenses. He outright denied using the funds for personal expenditures, but when his house was searched, the truth became evident. $80,000 in cash was found at his residence, and almost $10,000 of that was on his person. They also found the jewelry that he'd purchased and a Rolls-Royce that he'd bought from a dealership. A further $500,000 was found in his bank accounts, and he was charged with conspiracy and wire fraud. It was also discovered that he was involved in a Ponzi scheme, and that he intended to use some of the loan as a cover for that scheme. He'd already defrauded 20 people who fell for the scheme, after he convinced them to invest in his trucking company. They were told that their money would be used for operational costs, but he then used the funds to pay his debts and to maintain his lavish lifestyle. Some of the money was used to pay his accomplices who helped run the scheme, and he was found guilty of all charges against him. He was sentenced to 17.5 years in prison, 5 years of supervised release, and had to repay close to $4.5 million to the people whom he had defrauded. Number 1. Akshaya Kubiak, better known as Ash Armand, became known as the Zen Master on the 3rd season of the reality TV show Gigolos, before he was known to have studied Zen Shiatsu. The show followed the lifestyles of 5 male escorts in Las Vegas, of which Armand was one. He was included in the show's cast until its cancellation in 2016, but 4 years later, he would be accused of an unthinkable crime. In June, Armand and his friend, Herline Dulai, were spending time together in Las Vegas, and they decided to ingest an illegal substance. Armand claimed that while he was under the effects of the substance, he blacked out, and when he eventually regained consciousness, he was horrified to find Herline unconscious. He immediately called the police, and when they arrived at the scene, they realized she was no longer alive. An autopsy would reveal that she'd been badly assaulted and strangled, and Armand was taken into custody. He stated that he'd never raised his hand to a woman before, and that he never intended to harm his friend, let alone end her life in such a horrific manner. His family and friends were left shocked by the crime, stating that he was always a very calm and considerate person who wouldn't hurt a fly. His mother told the court that he was raised in the philosophies of the East and West, and that he was well-schooled in healing traditions. Rumors started spreading that Herline was one of Armand's clients, but this was never confirmed. It was discovered, though, that he'd started a business with her, though it remains unclear what type of company it was. When she lost her life, 29-year-old Herline was employed as a personal trainer, and according to those who knew her, she was a gentle soul who had a positive impact on everyone she met. Armand would tell investigators that she came over to his house that night and that they'd prayed together at one point. They lit a few candles, and after taking the illegal substances, sat down to watch the film Avatar. He remained adamant that he then blacked out and only woke up at 10 a.m. the following day. But he did recall that there'd been a struggle and told investigators that he temporarily lost his mind. When first responders arrived, he was in the process of administering CPR to his friend, while he was still on the line with the 911 operator. At first, he claimed she'd suffered a heart attack, but paramedics were unable to find any sign of this, and they noticed biological material in the room. He didn't argue with the police when they arrived, and he was taken into custody without any issues. He was charged with ending her life, and later he would claim that Herline had attacked him first, and that he was merely defending himself. But he decided to plead guilty since there was a mountain of evidence against him, and his charge was reduced to felony counts of voluntary manslaughter and mayhem as a result. He was sentenced to 8 to 20 years behind bars, after which he was transported to a correctional facility in Nevada. He appealed the length of his sentence, but it was denied due to the severity of the crime, and it's unlikely he'll see the outside of a prison for many years to come. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.